Um, all right, so welcome everybody to Launching a Startup. We're really excited to be hosting Elisabeth and George from Augment Bionics and hope that you guys enjoy their presentation. They've got lots of good info to share. I'm just going to quickly introduce the Women in STEM Society. We are very proud to be promoting, supporting, and connecting women in STEM across Edinburgh, but also across the world with some of our international events. So we want to promote equality and diversity across all STEM fields, and we have workshops, opportunities, lots of talks like these, and we have a whole network of mentors. So definitely join us for any future events. I have two of them listed here, and we're very grateful that you're here tonight. So I won't make you listen to me anymore. I'll switch you guys over to who you're really here to see, Elisabeth and George from Augment Bionics. So I will stop sharing my screen, and Elisabeth, if you want to share your screen, go right ahead, and welcome.
Oh, it says screen sharing has been disabled.
Give me 2 seconds. I think I need to make you a host. Is that all good now?
Let's try that.
Could you please offer me as well?
I should have done this before. Apologies. There you go. Should be all good.
All right, you can see my slides.
Yep, you're all good.
And not like any of the Zoom stuff, just the slides, right?
Yeah, just the slides.
Well, hi everyone. We're very happy to be here today. So yeah, my name's Elisabeth. I graduated from the University of Edinburgh in 2019 with my integrated Master's of Chemistry. And I was actually the founding president of the Women in STEM Society. So very excited to be back. And George, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, sure. My name is George. I was a mechanical engineer at the University of Edinburgh, and I added management to my course in my second year at the university. Then did Augment after university for about a year, if I'm not wrong. Is that right, Liz? I think it was about a year. And then I found well, we'll get on to that, why we had to move away from Augment slightly. But now I'm working at a company called Skin and Me, which is a skincare company, online skincare pharmaceutical company.
All right, so we'll get started with just an introduction to our company. So Augment Bionics was established in 2019 at the University of Edinburgh, and we are a startup dedicated to democratizing access to healthcare by producing high quality competitive products. And at the core of our company, and really our mission, is driving positive social impact. So our company was founded upon these core values of innovation, compassion, integrity, social responsibility, and sustainability. And hopefully throughout this presentation, you can see how we've really embodied these values and kept these in mind as we progressed through different phases of operation. So we'll start off talking about our journey a little bit. So George, if you want to start off with 2017 and the foundation of the AB project.
Sure. So funnily enough, none of the current team was there when Augment Bionics was founded as a university project. It was like essentially a society similar to F1 or what's the other one, Hyperloop. So Augment Bionics was founded by two guys a year above me. So they graduated in 2018, I believe. One engineer, Pedro Damas, and one, I'm not sure what his course was, but he was on the humanities side. And his name was Liz, any help here? Hubert.
Yeah, his name was Hubert.
Yeah, doesn't matter. Anyway, that was a huge team back then. It was about 30 people in total, if I'm not mistaken. Half of them were technical and half of them were commercial. And the idea was the technical team would work together to develop the prosthetic arm. Back then, it was all aimed at developing a 3D printed prosthetic hand for open sourcing the ideas and drawings and designs so other people could create them from their homes. So yeah, that was a big team of 30 people with lots of different departments, including engineering, mechanical, electrical, and software, product design, which was the more artistic side of things. So how do you make the prosthetic look good, not just functional? And there was also materials, some materials people as well trying to create a grip for the hand. And on the commercial side, there were people doing marketing, fundraising, and like writing a business plan, essentially, so top-down thinking. So after those two guys left, I applied to be the technical director. I joined about halfway through the first year of Augment Bionics founding. I applied to be technical director. They accepted my application. And there was another girl who was placed as commercial director. Her name is Iman Maludi, and I didn't know her before, but she was friends with everybody who's currently in the commercial team at Augment. So once she came, we decided that 30 people is too large for what we're trying to do. And the current strategy wasn't exactly suited to quick and rapid research and development. A group of 30 people, all students, all inexperienced, and including the managerial team, would not really achieve high results or the best results possible in a small period of time. So we cut down the team from 30 to about, I want to say 10 people, somewhere around there. And we essentially kept the most dedicated and the most talented people on the team. And we actually made cuts throughout. So right now we're 5 people, so from 2018 to 2020, we cut half the team essentially. And those are people who either left because they didn't have enough time, or we had to ask them to leave because they were not achieving their goals, or not being ambitious enough in what they were doing. So we started off quite strong. The R&D phase was quite good early on in our university careers because we had enough time to do it. And I was lucky enough to tie in my university project, my dissertation, to what I was doing at Augment Bionics, which is how I found the time to align university with a startup. I wrote my dissertation on 3D printed prosthetic sockets, and that topic is not really covered in research worldwide. There is some work on 3D printed prosthetic sockets for legs, but not much for arms at all. So that was my project, and through dedicating a lot of time to it, I managed to accelerate that part of the design. Then other parts of the hand that we're working on were obviously the mechanical hand, which I'll show you photos of later. And there was one person spearheading the project. His name was Jason. And there were a few other people working on electronics and other mechanical aspects of the arm. The commercial team at that point was approximately 5 people, and they've more or less stayed the same since the founding of the company, not the university project, in 2018. And together we've managed to achieve great results in fundraising, or at least winning grants with the university or other entities in Edinburgh. So we won money, which allowed us to buy a 3D printer, buy materials, and essentially pay for all other expenses to quickly develop a prosthetic hand. Liz, do you want to add anything before I expand on?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit more about the commercial side. So I was part of the commercial team. I joined in 2018 in September, so just when I was starting my final year. And some of the things that we did as part of the commercial team, so, none of us really had a background in engineering. We were definitely not experts in the technology. And in hindsight, we were a little bit disconnected. George was probably, the one person going back and forth, but we were a little bit disconnected in our efforts and our communication just because like the teams were so big. But some of the things that we did, so we worked on, the business plan, the business model, building our network. We worked on marketing and eventually on establishing and registering the business, which happened in February 2019. And another big part of that that I was actually involved in quite heavily was the fundraising. So of course, every startup, you need to get money somewhere. And as George kind of mentioned, we were applying for these grants in different fundraising competitions. And I think in our first year, we raised around £4,000, and we, made it to the top 10 of some pretty big competitions like the Converge Challenge and Scottish Edge. But a lot of the time, ultimately, we were unsuccessful. We were more successful at some of the smaller competitions within the university. I think one of them is called like the Business Idea Competition, and another one, Inspire, Launch, Grow by Launch Ed. We started gaining some media coverage as well. So on the right-hand side, you can see a picture of one of the articles that was written about us. And yeah, it was an exciting time, and there was a lot of accomplishments, but there was also a lot of setbacks. And I think that's any startup really, you're not gonna go into your first competition and win first place of a £100,000 grant. So it's just a learning experience and keeping positive through it all.
Can I jump in?
Oh yes, go ahead.
One thing, sorry. It was essentially about the £4,000. It doesn't sound like a lot at all, and it's not. Working at a company here to spend £4,000 a day just on marketing, but £4,000 for us back then was enough money to essentially push our R&D as far as we could do ourselves. So we were never short of money at Augment Bionics, since nobody was getting paid, and all the money was essentially being spent on 3D printed parts, which are pennies, and electronics from China or whatever. So we didn't have any expensive engineering processes like CNC milling, machining, injection molding, etc. It was all quite like stripped down to the bones engineering and like prototyping, which £4,000 was, funnily enough, plenty for what we're doing. But however, if we were working on this in a smaller team, and like all day, every day, we could have probably achieved the same as we did in terms of technical accomplishments in a much shorter period of time. Like rather than a year, we could have achieved it in a matter of probably a month or two. But our expenditure would also have to be higher to achieve that.
Yes, and I think
sorry, let's interrupt.
Just one thing that we were conscious of, like during that time when we were writing all of these grant applications and trying to forecast our financials, was the hiring of full-time staff. And ultimately we never really got to that point. And it was kind of like, the chicken and the egg problem. Like we needed full-time staff to progress further. We needed grant money to be able to hire full-time staff, but we also needed to progress further to get like £100,000 in grant money. So yeah, we were in a bit of a dilemma. And at the end, or in the summer of 2019, that's when the majority of our team graduated. And this was a difficult transition period. Most of us decided to pursue full-time roles outside of Augment Bionics. And that's kind of still where we are right now. So it was a time of uncertainty. It was a difficult transition period. I'm, currently based in North America. Other people are based elsewhere in Europe, not just in the UK. So it was difficult navigating time zones, finding time to speak as a team. And we were all balancing, like I said, full-time jobs or projects or other opportunities. And then, oh yeah, George, you have something?
Should we show some photos of the hand before going to 2020?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Let me just show. silly question. How do I share my screen?
You should, so I've made you a co-host. You should be able to click on a bottom bar and there will be a share screen option.
There we go. Yep, sorry.
No worries.
Cool. Okay. So I made a quick Google folder with a bunch of photos, but they're all mixed up. So please ignore anything that has PP in it. But I want to show you what we started off with the hand and where we got to in the end. So this is one of our first CAD models, if it loads, of the hand. You know, this looks like a wooden block or something like that, you know, but essentially one of our first CAD models of the palm. You can see the knuckles, the thumb, or where the thumb should go, the wrist, and like a hole, which was a gap for the electronics to fit into. That was the CAD model. And then what it actually looked like, if I can find that photo. Sorry guys, I didn't expect it all to be mixed up. I can't find it, but essentially it looks something like this, but completely covered in wires. This is probably our second prototype. It was completely covered in red and like green, red, and yellow wires. And it looked like an absolute mess, but it demonstrated our essentially idea and concept, which probably took us through the first few competitions and the first 2 grant applications. And then we slowly reached, we reached something like this. So this is a pretty clean design where all the electronics are put onto a custom PCB rather than being in separate parts attached by wires. It was all placed onto one board, onto microchips and micro drivers, and all programmed on that Arduino that you can see on the right side over there. This was mostly designed by Jason, the person I mentioned previously. Sorry. And this took him probably, so this is our 3rd prototype at Augment Bionics, but for him, this is probably his 57th iteration on the design, electronically and mechanically. You know, and he properly put his heart and soul into developing this hand. I need to really overstress the amount of work and dedication it takes to even get to this point, to get to these results. And this is a relatively simple hand in comparison to what you will see on the market right now. You know, it looks pretty good. I'd say it looks better than a lot of the hands out there. He managed to get the fingers to look more natural in a way. And the way the fingers fold as well isn't as creepy and mechanical as a lot of things out there. And that's mostly due to the string design that you can see over here. So these strings are used to pull the fingers in, and then the elastics on the back of the knuckles are used to pull the fingers out when the motors relax. And due to the nature of how the strings pull on the fingers, you get a much more natural grip, essentially. Yeah, and here we are testing out some things. You can see the absolute mess that we've created down here. The old hand used to be run just off of a breadboard in the background that you can see here. And all the electronics that you saw on that PCB, you know, that compact board over here, were just spread out on a big breadboard. This is our first iteration of the prosthetic socket that I was talking about earlier. The way this worked is that through my friends, there was an acquaintance who had a limb defect from birth. Yeah, starting from birth. And I talked to him and asked him if I could essentially scan his arm, the arm with the amputation, to see if I could replicate the shape of a stump and 3D print a perfect socket for his arm. And he was very happy to help out. And this was my first prototype. After designing the first prototype, I fit on the socket onto his arm, and he was extremely happy, even from the very first go. Oh, sorry, the way it worked, let me just go back, is I 3D scanned his stump with a 3D scanner, and that essentially achieved accuracy of somewhere 0.1 millimeter, or 0.5 millimeters. I don't remember the accuracy exactly. It was like an extremely accurate process. And then through CAD software, I modeled a socket around the 3D scan, and this was my result. And then with a felted marker, we just indicated areas that you need to change, and this was the result essentially. Over time, I worked on improving the socket to achieve a more comfortable fit. And the surprising result was that he said that his 5,000-pound carbon fiber socket, which is professionally made by a very experienced prosthetics company, was just as comfortable as my 5-pound PLA 3D printed socket, which was insane. So for such good results to be achieved for so little effort and for such a low price was a big stepping stone for us as a company. And I was checking the strength of the socket here by applying a bending load and then essentially putting the socket into tension, because 3D printed parts are strong in different directions. They're not like carbon fiber or steel, where the strength is more even no matter how you pull on the material. So yeah, I applied different loads, and this was my dissertation. So very happy with this. So was the patient. And with this, I went to a presentation in Netherlands to present the arm in a medical 3D printing conference. And this is what I took with me, essentially. So we went all the way from a crappy little design of the hand with a bunch of wires hanging out of it to a pretty professional looking device. This was falling apart on me half the time in the presentation, but with, blue tack and some tape and just coming back together. But the concept was there, essentially. The proof of concept was very, very solid. And if the circumstances had proven to be better, I would be a lot happier going to competitions, grants, or even investors with what we had there than what we had previously. And this is a demonstration of how the hand worked. There were 2 sensors on the arm of the user, and by tensing different muscles in the arm, the sensors picked up the difference in, I think it was electrical charge in the muscles. They sensed a change in electrical charge, I believe. That's how they worked. And the hand would open and close depending on those signals. Yeah, as you can see, it was not a perfect process. Sometimes the motors got stuck, the strings would get snagged, or something would go loose. But mostly it worked quite well. And I think, yeah, just one more photo of the hand. Yeah, so, sorry. Yeah, this is essentially what we came to in the end by, what was February 2020, I think, somewhere there. Yeah, right before COVID. Liz, I'll give it on to you.
Okay, I'll just share my screen again. Right. Okay, and so I think this brings us to 2020. So, we all know what happened in 2020, COVID, the pandemic, but this was actually a really exciting time for Augment Bionics. We managed to really do a lot during this time to help our communities. And so we were providing face shields to the NHS, but also to healthcare workers abroad. And we want to go into a little bit more depth about that for the remainder of the presentation, because yeah, that was just, a huge opportunity for us. And we started to get a lot of attention from the media. So as you can see on this slide, we were retweeted by the royal family. So yeah, we're going to discuss that. So why did we do what we did? So I think, if we all think back to March 2020, there was lots of news about there being a shortage of PPE, and this was not just in the UK, this was globally. And so one of the team members had an idea to start producing face shields, 3D printing face shields to donate to the NHS. So we kind of took this idea and ran with it. There was a lot of questions that needed to be answered. Of course, we needed money. Again, that's kind of a reoccurring issue with startups. We had to be wary of regulations and certifications. Although we were just donating these face shields initially, we were still an established company, and we certainly didn't want to be in any sort of legal troubles. There was a lot of logistics in terms of delivering the shields, taking orders, and initially, and George can talk about this a little bit further because he was kind of there on ground zero, but we were producing these through 3D printing, and that's obviously not the quickest process. So we were thinking about how we could produce these shields at a larger scale and faster and higher volume, because the need was just very high. And when we kind of started our GoFundMe and we started posting about this on social media, we started getting orders from doctors who were just desperate. And I think their desperation really came through in their contacts with us. And so we felt motivated to do more. So yeah, George, if you want to talk maybe about the starting stages, yeah. I think you're on mute.
Okay, should be good now. All right, where do we start? Okay, so somebody dropped a message in the group chat being like, oh, this is by the time we were very confident in our essentially rate of development of a prosthetic arm, and then suddenly all supply chains were cut loose from China, where we received most of the electronics, and where most of the world does receive electronics to this day. So our R&D was essentially stopped in its tracks. And somebody dropped a message into a group chat saying this company called Prusa, the same company that we bought 3D printers from, started making face shields like this. And we essentially had all the tools to do the same, and our only worry would be the screen, which in theory could be just replaced with what was it, Liz? Was it office dividers, or like office file dividers, or what was it?
Yeah, it was just like plastic from offices, like especially leftover because everyone was working from home.
Yeah. It's like this PVC sort of thing that you put on booklets. By the way, one of our colleagues, Will Harry, is on the call, so Will, do please chime in if we say something wrong or miss something. But this PVC covers they put on presentations, paper presentations, to make them look nice. And you can use that, or the theory was you could use that to make the visor part. So at first we were making literally 12 visors a day. That was the fastest we could go on our printer, on our little machine. And as you can imagine, that's pretty appalling. It's not fast enough at all to, well, fulfill all the orders we're getting. If we're printing 12, that means we're getting orders for 40. If we're printing 40, we're getting orders for 100. If we're making 100, we're getting orders for 500, etc. It was just like a never-ending issue, never-ending demand. And in this case, demand was bad because it meant that people were getting unprotected without visors. Yeah, essentially. And if this wasn't a charity, imagine if we were doing this out of business. But this was just all done for free. If we were doing it as a business and we could not provide the visors to people who needed them, they would go to somebody else who could. And as a business, you don't want that to happen. You always want to be capable of providing enough, or having enough stock, or having enough production capabilities to meet demand, or I believe so. Yeah, essentially, that's my point. But in this case, we couldn't meet demand, and it was horrible because people we knew working in hospitals were essentially going without protection, trying to help people out COVID, and were on respirators. So we started off at 12, and then I got in touch with my school, which I knew had, it's my school in London, where I went to from year 11 to upper 6th, where I knew they had recently acquired a bunch of Ultimakers, which is another brand of 3D printer. I think in the end I had approximately 14 printers working at the workshop. So within 1 month, went from 12 shields a day to 250. Is that right, Liz?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so, 250 or 300. Like for us that was huge. 250 shields for us was amazing. But at that point we had 2,000 orders in backlog. So it would take us and more coming. So we were never catching up. And we had a lot of money as well from our GoFundMe campaign. And we realized that we would never be able to make enough visors in time to spend that money and to donate enough shields. So that's when we decided to shift to, by the way, this 3D printing process was hell. I was probably spending 16 hours of my day at a workshop with my brother, as you can see here, who was cutting elastics. And this guy called Finn, I didn't know him before. He went to Latimer as well. He was 2 years younger than me, and he offered to help. And it was just us three working away for a month, ridiculous hours every day. That's probably the first time I ever felt anxiety. It was literally, I could feel my heart throbbing in my throat one day, just realizing that we had so many issues with supply chain. We didn't have enough materials. Are we gonna have enough money? We're not. Are we gonna have too much money? Are we gonna, like, it was hell. It was absolute hell. We're fighting tooth and nail. And if anybody remembers that meme from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where one of the characters standing up against the wall with a bunch of writing on the wall and pictures, that's how I felt every day. Essentially, it was awful. And I'm sure Liz can share her experiences as well, but I doubt they were much better than mine. But this is our first bag of our first bagged visor. Me and my brother. Please ignore the shaved head. We sent our first batch to my family friend who was working in Wales, and we received an incredibly heartwarming message, which essentially kickstarted, not kickstarted, but inspired us to work even harder for the next many, many months during COVID, because it was so heartwarming and so important for us that we were actually making an impact and a change to people who were in desperate need of it. I'm not going to read it off because I'm sure all of you have had time to read already. But we're not doing enough. We're doing a lot, but it definitely wasn't enough to make a real difference and really help. And we knew we could do more. And we knew we could do more while working less. That was a more important thing for me personally, for my personal health. And this goes for everybody who wants to do a startup. You have to look after yourself as well, so you don't reach burnout. And I was reaching burnout every week, to make it easier upon yourselves. And essentially, this is when we decided to switch to injection molding and die cutting, rather than 3D printing and laser cutting the transparent part of the visor. And as you can see, this is an injection molding block, injection molding mold, I guess. We ordered this, and the offer they gave us, the price they gave us is unprecedented in the industry. Usually these things cost tens of thousands of pounds, hundreds of thousands of pounds, but we paid £3,000 for the mold, and it was delivered to us within a week. So what we found throughout this PPE project was that everybody was very willing to help, even big companies, because they saw that we were making a difference, and they also wanted to help out the NHS and do the best they could to, help out doctors and nurses in the UK. And this is a very beautiful picture of the mold. And this was a proud moment for us because, I don't know, as an engineer at the University of Edinburgh, you're not really exposed to a lot of practical stuff. And this was like one of the biggest things. Like, the injection molding is a big deal in the industry, as I'm sure all of you know. And having injection molded part before you even have a proper job, quote unquote proper job, is incredible. So that was a big experience. And then we started getting a lot more quality control in the process, or we could control our quality much better in the process. We could scale up much faster. We had 2,000 parts being made every day, 2,000 shields made every day, which is tenfold increase in production, which is huge. I'm trying to find the picture of us making them. I can't find it, but this was one of our first shipments, which was to the Hammersmith and Fulham Council. They spread it around nursing homes and nursing homes and I guess hospitals in the area. And these are all the volunteers that are helping us achieve our goal. I ended up managing about 16 volunteers. So essentially planning and organizing the timetable for 16 people every day to make sure we had the most efficient production possible. Liz, am I missing anything?
No, I think that's all right, and I think yeah. After I can talk a little bit about my experience and perspective, because we obviously had very different, experiences throughout this whole initiative.
Do you want me to put up any pictures or anything, or do you want me to just turn off my screen for now?
Oh yeah, I can share my screen. It's all right. Right. Okay. Yeah, so I think George, kind of covered the steps that we went through and some of the technical stuff, but I can talk a little bit about the fundraising aspect, because again, that was something that I was quite involved in. And like George said, it was a really difficult time. We were all on the phone probably every single day, managing all of these different time zones, trying to, I don't know, it was just constant firefighting. There was always issues and problems that we had to solve. And of course, George had it much worse, being there and actually having to deal with it in person, whilst I was like on the other side of the world. But yeah, it was a stressful time, but it was also just really nice to be able to do something, especially, it was the beginning of lockdown, the beginning of COVID. So we all had a lot of time on our hands. So being able to utilize that time and also, in a good way whilst actually making a difference was really, really special. Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about the fundraising. So the initially we set up a GoFundMe and just kind of shared it on our social media within our networks. Then I got into contact with the university, and the university was able to help us a lot. So they shared our content on their social media. Obviously, they have a much wider reach than we do. They also spoke to alumni. They had a fund for different COVID efforts, and we ended up being part of that, so people could choose to donate to Augment Bionics for PPE. And I think a takeaway from that is to always utilize your networks, especially, the university. We are all students or former students of the University of Edinburgh, and just the reach is massive. People are always willing to help. So yeah, don't take that for granted, I think. And we ended up raising over £100,000 and producing and distributing 120,000 face shields to over 60 NHS trusts, GP practices, and then also, like I said, to countries in need abroad as well. So we could never have imagined that we would have raised £100,000, but yeah, anything is possible. And I think, yeah, just to touch on a couple other things. So like George said, from an engineering perspective, having that mold is like really special. And I think this was a huge learning experience for our company. So we were able to learn a lot about the regulations, the certifications, like the legal aspect. We were also able to learn that just because we started off being like a 3D printed prosthetic company, that's not necessarily the route that we have to follow moving forwards. So that it's okay to diversify, it's okay to pivot, and maybe, just because your initial idea is, the one that you first had, you don't necessarily have to follow that through. You can definitely repurpose. Anything to add to that, George?
Yeah, I mean, something about the team, there were moments in the team where we were arguing a lot, every day about specific aspects of the thing. Was it regulations or production or everything. And I think it's quite important to understand that the argument part is, and arguing and disagreeing with each other is quite important in any company, especially a startup, because through that process, the scientific process of trying to prove that you're right and the other person is wrong, obviously within bounds, is very important to come to the real truth of the matter. And I think we never really had done that before we had so much pressure, before we had a lot of pressure as we did in the PPE project. So the prosthetic project never applied enough pressure on us to be in a situation where we had to make high-stake decisions, but the PPE project did. And I'm sure, like, I did this, and I'm sure everybody else did in the team. Once we hung up the calls, it was like, oh my God, how do I work with these idiots, you know? But after the PPE project, I was like, I'll work with these guys again and again and again and again. It is quite important to understand that that process is important in any startup, in any group project, and being able to be comfortable with that situation. You have to be comfortable that you will disagree with your peers, and even with your superiors. You know, like it's skin to me right now. It is completely okay to tell the CEO that he's wrong, or tell my manager that he's wrong, and this is why I'm right. You know, and nobody will blink twice. You know, or be surprised by that sort of situation. You know, so I think it is quite important to have that sort of culture in your company where there is no, I guess, toxicity in decision making. You know, it's not just one person's voice. No matter how hard they try, no matter how hard I tried, it's everybody's voice. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Definitely some frustrating calls, but I think it all made us better. Like, we explored all different opinions and avenues before we made important decisions. And again, like in hindsight, maybe, you know, we took too long going through every single decision and every single opinion, but we are all very young and inexperienced. And I think navigating a business or startup is difficult. Doing that during a pandemic is like 100 times more difficult. Although we were able to, you know, get support in terms of funding or, you know, cheaper materials or help with getting the mold and stuff, a lot of it was just us. Like, nobody's an expert about, no one's an expert on supplying face shields during a pandemic. So it was really uncharted territory for us and most of the people that we usually relied on for support. All right.
Yeah, and one more thing about this decision making. That's where the CEO or the CTO comes in. They are the person who decides, all right, we've run out of time to make a decision. I'm going to be the person who makes that decision, which is based on the information I've gathered from my team. You know, and the team has to trust the CTO and CEO that they're making the best decisions. And even if you disagree, once the decision is made, you kind of have to wholeheartedly follow it. Again, within bounds, everything, you know, but to make the team work, you really have to follow it and make sure that you smash that sort of decision, that target. This obviously applies much easier to decisions such as, should we go with, you know, this type of attachment to this device or a different type of attachment to this device, whatever. It's much harder when it comes to strategy decisions and big company decisions that could have like a knockdown effect 5 years down the line, you know. But it all does come from experience and probably from luck as well.
Yes, and I think something else that, you know, we mentioned before this, our team size was larger, and the amount of time that was required during this face shield initiative and the work that we did, it was a lot. It was very, very demanding, and that's when we really started seeing the team drop off, and our team became what it is now, like a much, much smaller team. We know that everyone now is dedicated because it was either, you know, during COVID they worked, or we had to like reorganize and just go with who we had. So very telling, I think, as well. Do we want to actually give an update about like where we are now before we kind of go on to some of our key takeaways? So we did think that face shields could potentially be a permanent product offering for us. And we did explore this in quite a bit of depth over the summer. Ultimately, our efforts haven't really been successful. And George, if you want to talk about that a little bit more. You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I'll share my screen in one moment. I'll show what we're trying to develop. So at some point down the line, we realized that there's a better product offering. Essentially, rather than having multiple parts to a shield, you could just have made out of one part. You know, be one material, one part, one manufacturing process. And we were hoping to cut down on production costs through this method. And to be honest, it was quite difficult to get to this point in terms of designing the shield. So this was the end result. It was quite difficult to get to this point to make sure that everything worked together really well, and that the customer could understand how to use it. So it was an origami product. Essentially, you receive it flat packed, and then through a series of folds, you make a 3D shape. And it was quite difficult to communicate well to the user how to fold it and how to use it. But I think in the end we got there through like graphic illustrations, and really clear designs. Where are we? Yeah, so essentially I just wanted to show you some pictures of where I started and where I ended up. This was my first prototype, which was quite funny. Oh, by the way, I didn't have transparent plastic to work with, or transparent plastic was big enough. So which is why you will see some, opaque plastics, but imagine it's transparent. This is where I started off with, working with, again, one sheet of plastic and folding in certain ways to get a shape that would protect the user's face well enough and would be fast to assemble. So yeah, these are essentially the steps which I took, eventually arriving at what we have here. Oh yeah, one important part about regulations and testing. We completely overlooked this process at the very beginning, which came to bite us later on in the process. So when I was designing this shield, I made sure that every single box was ticked in terms of quality and regulations, medical regulations. And essentially, one of the things I had to do was build a jig, as you see here. Although it was very janky, it did the job, which allowed us to see if the visor provided enough coverage for the face. Liz, if you want to elaborate more on that later, please let me know and I'll come back to this. Eventually we came to this design, and we had probably sifted through 300 manufacturers and material suppliers, which was an incredible pain, and it took the entire team to do, until we finally found one material supplier and one manufacturer which could match the quality and the price that we were looking for. And this is probably, was this by August, Liz, or was it by July?
Yeah, this was like July, August time.
Yeah, and at this point in time, we were very confident that we could do it. We already found an investor through Will, who's on this call. We found an investor who was ready to invest, was it £100,000 for, it was a very high percentage of equity, but we were ready to go for it because it was now or never. I think it was like 20% of equity, if I'm not mistaken, maybe a bit lower. It was all essentially ready to go except for the market. An infinite market back in March went into almost a negative market. NHS didn't want any of these. They're trying to cancel contracts because the UK started producing a lot of face shields, and then all the contracts that were agreed upon with China but not delivered due to the supply chain issues, China suddenly started delivering all of these visors that there was a backlog of 4 or 5 months to the UK. So suddenly UK had 5 years worth of supply of visors, plastic sitting in warehouses that they couldn't use, So we found through our connections that NHS was basically didn't have a market for this anymore. So at that point, sadly, in August, September, this project just fell through. Yeah, Liz, if you want to, we can also talk about our 5 core values and how this PP project really struck home with each and every single one. If you can please go back to that slide, Liz, and we can do that.
Sure. Yeah, and actually, I know there's only about half an hour left, so we can talk about that, and then maybe just questions, if there's any questions.
Yeah.
I just have to get the slide up.
An important point is that these core values, I didn't really think about them when we were doing stuff, but I think these 5 core values is something that we truly believed in. Maybe it's part of our generation, or maybe it's just who we are as people, but I really didn't give it much thought throughout the process. But when we were making this presentation, when we were making this presentation, we kind of realized that, or at least I realized that we didn't really stray far from these 5 values, which was very surprising for me, actually.
Yeah, I'm just sorry. I'm just getting it up. My computer is.
I can do it. It's right here.
All right, I got it. Okay. Oh. Is it working? Oops. Okay. Yeah, so just about the values, I think it's really important, like if you're starting a company or, a project, it's really important to define these values early on. And one of my first memories about joining the Augment commercial team, like one of our very first meetings, was defining our values. And that was in 2018. And now, a couple years later down the road, these values really have guided our work. And I think with the PPE project specifically, the reason that we were being so socially responsible and acting with compassion and innovation is why we got so much attention as well. If we had just decided to start selling these shields at the start, then it's unlikely that, we would get so much attention from the media, from the university, from people donating money. But the fact that we were really doing this from a place of compassion, I think, kind of spoke for itself. And George, if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, sure. You mean just on compassion or the other 5?
No, just all our values.
Yeah, sure. So, I would go through innovation a bit more, but it's kind of hard over Zoom, and also we don't have much time. But I was probably going through 1 design every week for the visor, which is insane because with every design, the production has to change. And by the time production got used to the old design and was doing it really well, a new design would come and would ruin the entire process, and we'd have to start from 0. But that was necessary to improve the product and make sure that the doctors and nurses got the best they could and they were protected as much as possibly they could be. Does that make sense? That they were protected as best as they could be. Anyway, and I think that really plays between innovation, socially responsible in terms of best quality. The best quality products that you can manufacture, and integrity. They all sort of mold into one in that case. And then integrity, we had an issue where at one point we realized that I think about 15,000 of our visors were not compliant with regulations. And the decision was made to recall these visors from the client. Thankfully, just 1 client, I think, or maybe 2, that received them, and they hadn't used many of them at all. I was personally on the other side of things. I was saying that we should inform them, but not necessarily recall the visors. But finally, smarter minds, including I don't remember Liz, whose side you were. Maybe you were on my side, but smarter minds prevailed, and we ended up recalling those visors and replacing them on the same day with visors that did comply. So at the end of the day, something that was a huge problem in my head, as a CTO, as a person who was spearheading this project, I ended up agreeing with the people who were actually definitely more correct than I was at the moment. And that ended up in, Liz, you stop sharing your screen?
Yeah, I did, just in case we want to, sorry, I didn't know how much more you wanted to.
All right, sorry, yeah. Yeah, essentially, that was part of integrity, making sure that you're being honest with your clients and not cheating anybody out of anything. And then finally, sustainability. You might think, PPE, you're making tons of plastics. And yes, we did, which was quite gross, to be honest. But we tried to tackle that problem as best we could. Since PPE can't be manufactured in any other way, we were desperately looking for non-plastic replacements for the visor, but none of them were feasible at all. They were either very hard to manufacture, very expensive, or the quality was extremely poor. Plastic is an incredible material. If you ignore how damaging it is to the environment, it is incredibly versatile, or plastics are incredibly versatile materials, group of plastics, and it's very hard to replace them. And in the case of PPE, it is currently almost impossible, sadly. So what we did to tackle that was make sure that the RPP was reusable, use materials that were reusable and cleanable, and make sure to tell our clients how to do that. For example, the most common facial that you see is the one with the foam at the front and a visor, and that cannot be reused since a lot of materials and particles can get stuck in the foam itself, and that is not cleanable. We're also trying to reduce the weight of the plastic while maintaining its strength and the quality. So we're doing essentially the best we could to maintain high sustainability. Yeah, I think that's it from me.
I think just really quickly, maybe George and I can just do some key takeaways just about startups in general. So I'll start. I think one of our biggest learnings, at least from my perspective, especially with our PPE project, was that just because something is a good idea doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good business idea. So the shield that George designed and came up with, we can all agree that it was a great idea. It was solving issues. It was probably better than the options available on the market, but commercially, like if the market isn't there, if the timing isn't aligned, then a good business or a good idea doesn't mean anything. And so I think knowing when to let go, and that doesn't necessarily mean like give up, but you can't work on something that's just not going to be successful. So knowing when to let go, and maybe it's something we can come back to at some point. Yeah.
There's a second lesson from that, is that time to market is also incredibly important. So if we had done that 2 or 3 months earlier, we probably could have really been successful in that venture. But since we're quite late, months, or weeks late, which is insane to think that the market can change that fast, we essentially missed out on the opportunity.
Yeah, and I think we'll open it up to questions now, and if there are a
couple more things actually before. I want to say the team is incredibly important, and I'm very lucky to have ended up within such an incredible team, including Liz somehow. But yeah, incredible luck to be in that team. I don't think it would have been possible without that team. So the team you build around yourself is very important. It's hard to go into what qualities you should be looking for, but you should be looking for people who are enthusiastic, essentially, like incredibly enthusiastic and dedicated, diligent, hardworking, and just good people at heart, to be honest as well. You don't be working with people who you are worried if they will, try and get one over you in the future, or anything like that. Another big lesson is to not be scared of giving away equity, especially if it's your first business. Like I was very opposed to giving away so much equity to potentially giving so much equity to our investor. But if he hadn't invested, then there would have been no way of developing our product. So it's either you do it and you end up with more value for your shares, or you don't do it and you end up just sort of like on the same place that you were already. Sometimes you can work with your own money, but in our situation where we needed to expand our production, and really kickstart the business, it was not an option.
Yeah, and I think with the team as well, obviously, especially if you're looking at an idea that's technical, you obviously need that technical expertise and someone who's experienced and, really innovative. But I think finding people that share your vision is almost more important. Obviously, I would never be able to do the engineering work that George has done or the technical team did, but finding engineers or, technical people who have that vision and aren't just like doing it because they're really good at engineering, but it's bigger than that when you're trying to start your own company. So yeah, I think, are you okay to turn it to questions now, George?
I just want to hop in and say thank you so much for your presentation. It's so interesting to hear about your journey, kind of like the process that you went through, especially coming from like an engineer's perspective. It's cool to see that. and also hear a little bit about your key takeaways. Yeah, hopefully lots of people in here have been inspired by that, and feel free to pop your questions in the chat. Elisabeth and George, you guys can moderate that. Feel free to answer questions as they pop up, and I'll also add in my own as well, as I have a few.
Yeah, I think there's one question from Alex. What do you think is the hardest / most underestimated part of launching a startup? All right, well, I think there's a lot of different things. From my perspective, firstly, time. So, if you want to be successful, you need to give it your all. Right now, yes, we are in full-time jobs and a little bit uncertain about the future of Augment, but if you have the opportunity to take your idea full-time, then you have to do it. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult. It's very time demanding. And the other thing I think is to believe in yourself. And a lot of this comes from my experience, final year at university, going to some of the grant competitions, doing some of the pitch competitions. And when you arrive there, it's crazy. Like, everyone is so impressive. Everyone looks like they have everything together. They have this winning business idea, but you have to remember that you are there for a reason. And actually, startups are not nearly as organized as they may seem. It's a lot of, scrambling and doing things and wearing different hats and just doing what needs to be done. So definitely don't be intimidated by some of these events that you go to.
Yeah, it's a very difficult question to answer. I'm sorry, Alex, but there's so many difficult things and things you never expected to happen. I think the most unexpected thing is, as Liz said, the wearing many different hats that you do in a startup. You end up doing everything, especially if it's a small team and you're just starting out. Yeah, it's just so many. Like, I think the number of problems that you will face very early on is what people do not expect. That's what hits you the hardest. All right, second, from Maria Dimitrova, a couple of questions. What transversal competencies, sorry, my reading for some reason is so bad right now. What transversal competencies have you developed during this experience, and what would you like to have picked up earlier? And number two, what are your future plans? Okay, I can start off first on this. So to answer that first question, what did I pick up and develop along the way? I think definitely managerial skills I developed along the way. I had no leadership experience, was never a captain of a sports team or anything like that before becoming technical director of Augment Bionics, and I just sort of fell into the role. And luckily, my personality, compared to other technical people, was a bit more open. Rather than being introverted, it was a bit more extroverted. So that sort of helped me organize and manage the technical team and communicate with the commercial team. Yeah, essentially, what I picked up was managerial skills and solving issues, but people issues, not technical issues, at the very beginning. And what would I like to have picked up earlier? I'm not sure, actually. There's so many things I would have preferred to done earlier. Probably picking up contacts earlier, because contacts are everything. Not everything, but contacts are a lot for success, and they're a big part of luck, essentially. And I wish we could have picked up our contacts earlier than we did. And the second question, what are your future plans? So I'm working at the company with Skinemy right now. They've essentially laid out a 5-year plan in terms of vesting shares for me here. And I'm quite happy to stay here essentially for that time. But at Augment Bionics, we're always open to new opportunities which are coming our way. So I'm also going to be working on that. And in 5 years' time, or maybe even less, I would either switch to a full-time startup job, or startup job that I founded, or carry on with Augment Bionics, or gone on to study further, because I've always been inspired by the space industry and I've always been thinking about working there. But that's the decision for the future.
Yeah, I'll give my perspective on those questions. So in terms of competencies, So I studied chemistry at university, and I was a little bit, I was always interested in the commercial career path, but I didn't have a lot of experience in that. So I think really Augment just gave me a lot of commercial awareness, a lot of things that I, wouldn't have even thought of, and things that have helped me in my full-time role. But also I've learned things that I wouldn't learn in my full-time role because, in a bigger company, you never have this level of responsibility from day one. So, and I think in terms of future plans, yeah, we have a couple things on the horizon for Augment, potentially nothing certain. Like I said, right now I'm in my full-time role. And I think it's difficult, to commit to a startup full-time, and especially it takes a certain type of person to be able to take on that risk. And I think, especially from a woman perspective, like I was on this podcast with some actually Augment Bionics co-founders from our team who are also women. And we talked about how we always feel like we need to have a backup plan. If you're committing to a startup, you need to know that it's going to be successful. But of course, you never have that level of certainty when you're founding your own company. And like between George and I, just an example, and this is, probably just stereotyping genders and gender roles, but I feel like George is a lot more open to risk. I'm a little bit more risk averse. So yeah, these are all things to take into consideration that will likely affect our future plans.
Yeah, but how the amount that I'm open to risk is just perverted. Like it's really messed up. Definitely should dial that back. But yeah, like my risk aversion is negligible, which might have helped with a lot of the things that we did. But it is also important to have a person in the team. And I think Liz was not that risk averse. There was one other person whose name is Clara,
Yeah.
and she was incredibly risk averse, and she definitely reigned back in, and sort of grounded us, which definitely helped. Yeah. And sorry, another thing which I would like to answer in terms of skills I'd like to pick up. As a technical person, I was quite mechanical based, and my knowledge of electronics and software is still minimal. And I wish I had picked up earlier. I wish I was a much more holistic engineer. And studying one course at university, such as mechanical engineering or electrical or software, doesn't really expose you to the other fields as much. Maybe mechatronics would, but the big popular ones don't really do that. So you really have to spend your own time and really try and dedicate yourself outside of studies to become a better engineer. Such as joining something like F1, Edinburgh University F1. Although I've heard that they're quite closed off and don't really give that good tasks to people. Sorry to completely crap from them, but we weren't any better, but sometimes there's not that many tasks to go around. That's the problem. F1 or Hyperloop, or even starting your own thing. How make another prosthetics company or university project at Edinburgh? Why not? It's just all about you learning engineering, which you will never do through just the university studies. I can guarantee you that, especially at Edinburgh.
I think as well, so firstly, yeah, I meant risk averse in terms of my personal life and committing to startups that's uncertain. But I would say within our team dynamics, George is, the least risk averse, and I'm probably pretty close behind him. But I think something else, to answer that question about what would you like to have picked up earlier. So I joined Augment in my final year, and I wish I would have explored the startup scene earlier at university. Earlier on, you have a lot more time. It was difficult in my final year, and I'm sure George can say the same, doing your final dissertation, your exams, finding a full-time job, and doing Augment. It was a lot, but it was still easier at university than it is now, being in a different continent and also actually having a full-time job. So yeah, I think for anyone who's interested, even remotely, exploring the startup scene, Edinburgh is a really great place to start. It's a very lively startup scene. The university has a lot of resources that are helpful. LaunchEd, various other initiatives, granting, fundraising, just a lot of ways that they can help you. And so exploring that, even if you don't have an idea trying to find people who have ideas and just getting involved as soon as possible.
Great, thank you guys for answering those questions. Just quickly before we hop into some more, did you guys get support from LaunchEd, or what kind of support did you find at the university?
Liz, take it away. This is all you. Like.
Yeah, so we did talk to LaunchEd. We spoke with Lorna Baird quite a lot whilst we were at university, and actually even last year after we graduated. In terms of grants and funding, I think I mentioned like that we were successful for like the business idea competition and the Inspire Launch Grow. So I think we were kind of just on like a mailing list, and when these came up, we would apply for them. But with Lorna specifically, she was quite helpful. Like she looked over, I think, our business plan, and we actually pitched to her once as well. And she also assisted us like looking through our funding applications for some of those bigger competitions like Converge or Scottish Edge. And after, like during our PPE efforts, it was really just like marketing and funding, and that's really how they helped us. They did put us in contact with some people in South Africa at the university there, and some charities to see if like they would want face shields. So yeah.
I can't thank LaunchEd enough, because I think at the beginning we got like below £1,000 from them for some sort of grant, but that really kept us going. They made us, they helped us survive essentially through the R&D process during the prosthetics projects essentially. Yeah, so they're a great resource and great people working there. I'm very enthusiastic about what they do. So LaunchEd, the LaunchEd people who work at LaunchEd, they're incredibly enthusiastic about helping startups like Augment. And that's, as I said, the most important trait that you could find in people.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, definitely to anyone looking for a startup, go to LaunchEd. I just wanted to quickly ask, for anyone who's interested in the audience, do you see any opportunities opening up with Augment Bionics anytime in the future? Or are you keen to people kind of messaging you and asking, like, kind of pitching ideas or anything, or any sort of opportunities like that?
Well, to be honest, I don't think we're looking to grow the team, sadly, since we're not, I don't think a single one of us has yet been paid, I guess, from Augment, because we've never really made a commercial success. So unless something changes very, very quickly in the near future, sadly, that's not going to happen. Sorry, what was the, how to get in touch with us? Yeah, I mean, we're absolutely super open to ideas. I mean, I think 2 days ago, our old business partner messaged us to develop a new device with them, and we said, yeah, of course. So, very open to people messaging us and suggesting ideas. And, since we're so small and we're quite fair, essentially working out a plan going forward.
Yeah, I think we don't really know what the future holds for us. We're, again, in this kind of transition phase and trying to really figure out where we're going. So we're not going to be actively recruiting people. However, if someone has an idea that is in line with the things that we have looked at, then, of course, reach out, and just, if you want a sounding board, or if you think there is an opportunity for collaboration, alternatively, if you just want advice or, have any questions, that's also totally fine.
Great, thank you guys. It would be great if also you could share maybe your LinkedIn or something in the chat in case anyone wants to reach out to you and ask any further questions. That would be great. I guess
message us on Facebook or Instagram. I don't check the LinkedIn for Augment Bionics.
Yeah. Great. I think Elisabeth's got her LinkedIn.
Yeah, so I just shared LinkedIn, like the homepage. I'll just reshare.
I have a few more questions for you both. So one of them, George, I suppose, kind of any tips for creating prototypes and stuff with such a low budget? Like, do you have anything to say about that further? Any tips for anyone who might be looking to do a similar thing and doesn't have a large budget?
I mean, we're super lucky in, post 2010 basically to have 3D printers, and they're the most incredible device for a small prototyping entity like us. That's a huge asset. It helps incredibly to work on it, and like this is the best age for cheap prototyping. You have free 3D CAD software, cheap electronics worldwide. You can almost do everything for free and spend pennies on parts. It's all about the time you can invest into it, essentially. This is going for small devices, relatively speaking, that you can print in a 3D printer. That wouldn't take ridiculous amounts of time to do. If you wanted to print out, I don't know, like a car, that's just impossible, basically. Any advice for prototyping other than that? I guess don't be scared to just keep on trying. It's incredibly frustrating, prototyping. Like, it is incredibly frustrating. And you want to give up, you want to just dropkick whatever you were designing across the room, or really don't give up. And don't be scared to ask for advice. Internet is a great place as well. I know this is controversial as hell, but Reddit's amazing for this sort of thing. Like, don't go there for politics. Go there for, the 3D printing subreddits, the woodworking subreddits, the DIY stuff. And if you have any questions, the internet is a great place to ask. Which will answer them like very happily, and even find collaborations there as well. Essentially.
Great, thank you, George. Yeah, that's great advice. Definitely, there's so much stuff online now. Would like to reiterate that I'm like working on all these online kind of softwares for my own design projects. So yeah, it's great time to kind of just play around with stuff, I think, and then see what ends up happening. Elisabeth, I've also got a question more directed to you. Just grant applications, people see them, they see these big scary grants and they're like, oh, how can I kind of get this, or how do I even get started on this? Do you have any tips for anyone looking to submit any grant applications?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. When we started writing them, they're very long. They require detail that you just don't have as a startup, like projections, financial projections, like 3 to 5 years, or I don't know, in the future that you just don't have. But I think a lot of it is just the best estimations that you have and being able to come up with them. Like, it doesn't have to be accurate. It doesn't have to be true. It's just like, trying to come up with some sort of estimation. And that's very specific to the financials. A lot of the other stuff, there's usually, market research section. And if you're applying for grants, you probably have already done some market research, or you really should have done some market research to understand what else is out there, to understand the competitor landscape. And then some of the more introductory parts, like about your business, your mission, and things like that. Again, you probably should have defined by the time you're applying for grants. So a lot of it will come from the work that you've already done. Another part, which is quite important, is the team, and that is emphasized in these grants. And feedback that we got in a lot of these competitions was that our team was too big, and they were worried about that. And ultimately, it makes sense why they were, because our team did significantly decrease. So yeah, just leveraging the skills and the experience that you have within your team, allowing everyone to shine, and really showing why you have the team members that you do. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Business plan is very hard. I think it's harder than prototyping, to be honest, at least for me personally. Like, it is incredibly difficult. And again, don't be scared to ask for help. And sometimes business plans, although competitions and grants for some reason want long business plans, actual investors don't want long business plans. They want like one pagers, or like maybe a few pages that essentially highlight the most important information. And that's what you might want to do for yourself as well. Yeah. Oh, even for grants, actually, you could probably have like a preface, I guess, the most important stuff, and then the details. But
and I think, especially for some of these competitions, like if you progress to further stages, like I mentioned, they have pitch competitions, and I think that's something that getting some help on, whether it's Launch Ed or someone else, I think that's really, really important, because delivering like the perfect pitch is not natural, and what they're looking for is not something that you would necessarily come up with yourself, and often it's just like 1 minute to talk, and it's not just necessarily who talks the clearest or what you say, but there's kind of an art to it, and I wouldn't say that I have mastered that art, but getting advice on that is really important.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much to both of you. Hopefully there are some of you in the audience who are looking also to kind of make your own startup or get started with that. Yeah, thanks for your advice. That's great. And yeah, so I don't know if anyone else has any final questions before we wrap up, but feel free to ask away. If
Can
not,
I say one more thing, actually? So this is particularly for this society, I guess, it's women in STEM. And it's quite weird that, I mean, it's women in STEM, but Augment didn't have any women in the technical part of the team. We're actually quite actively working towards finding somebody who would be suitable for a technical side, but we just didn't have any applications from a woman, really. Sadly, we only had one, which was amazing. And that was when we were wrapping up the prosthetic stuff, essentially, wrapping up our university stuff. But if you're a woman looking to go to work in STEM, I know it can be quite intimidating. First of all, you spend your entire engineering career, engineering student life, in a world which is like basically all guys in in a lecture hall or in a whole engineering class, and then you have to go into that again in the industry. And if you really want to be an engineer, you just have to show that you're enthusiastic about it. To be honest, like most of the people in my class, women or men, were not really enthusiastic about engineering, and I would have never picked them to come join the team. But it happened so that the first team was made up of my close friends at Augment Bionics, the technical team, and even my close friends who were girls were not interested in joining, although even being asked. If you are interested, make sure to make it clear that you're incredibly interested, enthusiastic, and dedicated to being a nerd, basically. Like, I mean, that's that's the best way I can put it. Like, embrace the nerd, embrace the studying, embrace the science and the technology and the essentially pursuit of in the pursuit of inventiveness, and like just show that you are actually excited by it. Don't be scared to show who you really are and your love for the industry, essentially, for engineering.
I think that's a really good point to like finish off on. Yeah, we never had women in our technical team, and it's a shame that we weren't able to achieve that. And I think also the podcast that I was talking about earlier that myself and two other Augment Bionics co-founders were featured on is called the Her Own Boss podcast. And they're really trying to address the fact that there are so few female co-founders out there. So anyone, any women in STEM who are looking to be co-founders, like just go for it, because we need more.
yeah, definitely. Thank you. That's a great message to kind of end off on to any of you, whether you're a woman in STEM or maybe a woman or just anyone here listening. Definitely don't be afraid to kind of look at what you're interested in and try to kind of create something from that, because I mean, look where Augment Bionics have kind of ended up and look at the adventure they've been on. Well, thank you so much, Elisabeth and George, so much. I said so much twice there, for speaking today. It was so interesting to hear about your journey, kind of where you're at, just like your struggles and, where you found success and just all your insight there. And I'm sure there are a few people in the audience who will take something from this and hopefully kind of use it and make their own maybe startup or business or anything. So if you guys want to contact Elisabeth or George, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or Instagram, Facebook. And also if you want to keep in touch with the Women in STEM Society, if you want us to do more events like this, then also feel free to let us know. And you can find us as Edinburgh Women in STEM, basically on all social medias. Don't know if you have any final words to conclude, Elisabeth and George, but thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks very much for listening to us, and hopefully, yeah, you're able to, take something away from this. And please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or want any advice, and we can do our best to try and help you out.
Great.
Thank you, guys.